5 years later, the Mookie Betts trade still ranks as probably the worst one of the 21st century. And it's up there of the worst trades in baseball history.
You are Locked On MLB, your daily MLB podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans, and welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully. Follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter or whatever they're calling it these days. And on Instagram, I am your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. But the best way to get a hold of me is right here on the YouTubes, and leave a message in the comments section. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 of bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Go visit FanDuel, and this is the time to do it. I can already tell there's a couple people who are probably not going to be thrilled that there's yet another episode that I'm doing now that's kind of sort of has Dodger elements to it. The regular season is going to start in a few days, and there's going to be all sorts of news going around. And the Dodgers are going to be a big part of it. But you know what? It's going to be the beginning of the year. I made my picks, and I didn't pick the Dodgers to win the World Series. I didn't pick them to make the World Series. And, some people thought I was banana boats for that. But you know what? I'm your pal Sully, and I don't care. Yeah. By the way, Jet Black Onyx is an everyday Sully, and I'm sure he's not thrilled. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the Dodgers today, but thanks for listening. I swear. What team do you want me to talk about, buddy? Just let me know. Let me know. Okay, a couple of pieces of news were going on in the baseball world today. One involved Craig Kimbrell, who signed a minor league deal with the Atlanta Braves. Actually, he did that the other day. He's going back to where he started from. He started his career with 5 solid years with the Atlanta Braves, where he was probably the best reliever in baseball, and was left rotting in the bullpen in a critical game against the Giants, against Los Angeles, in 2013. He's had a weird career because he's had years where he's been absolutely phenomenal, and rooting for the Red Sox in the 2018 World Series, I can tell you there are moments where your heart was in your throat when he was on the mound. But he's 37 years old, going back to the Braves, and that is a completely risk-free move. There's strange news, the fact that Mookie Betts didn't play in the series in Japan. And he's been pretty sick, and he's lost some weight, and kind of, it's kind of come out of the blue, because Mookie Betts was looking to have a season where he was going to be spending a lot more time in the infield, giving them some depth, giving them a little bit of flexibility. And then just before the trip to Tokyo, he lost 15 pounds, which I would love to be able to do, but that's not the right way to do it. And he got very, very sick. Now, hopefully, if you're a baseball fan, you're going to you have to root for the best players to be playing. You can't want sickness. You can't want illness. That's really crappy if you do that. But, you hope that this is going to be just a blip at the beginning of the year. Kind of like there's always injuries and people losing time at the beginning of the year. And by the end of the year, you're like, oh, I totally forgot about that. That's what I truly hope is going to happen here with Mookie Betts. It's just something that just happened. The other piece of news, Atlanta signed 2 players. They signed Alex Verdugo and they signed Craig Kimbrell. The Verdugo signing is interesting for one reason. He signed a $1.5 million contract. Again, good work if you can get it. And he is going to be optioned to AAA. I almost said Richmond, because the Braves minor league team was a AAA team, was in Richmond for so many years, in Gwinnett. So Alex Verdugo, who up until just a couple of days ago was unsigned on the eve of the season beginning, picks up a minor league deal with the Braves to give them some depth. He's probably going to be a fourth outfielder. He's still a good defensive outfielder, has a little bit of pop, but not as much as people thought he was going to. He's been a pretty much a average hitter the last couple of years. Not great, not terrible. Good defensively. In his time with Boston last year with the Yankees, was a complete non-factor in the division series and the championship series. Did hit a home run and drove in 5 runs in the World Series, but more memorably, struck out in a ball in the dirt off of Walker Buehler to end the World Series, and then couldn't find a job. Literally could not find a job until a week before the season starts. And the Braves said, fine, we'll give you $1.5 million, go to minor leagues and give us a little bit of depth. Alex Verdugo is he is 20, he's going to be 29 years old in May. And he is pretty much the idea of him being an elite player, that ship has sailed. That ship has sailed. He was a dynamite prospect in the Dodgers organization. There were some off-field things that were not great. And then in his time with Boston, had played well in the COVID year, and then after that, had a good start to 2021. But by the end, but he never was, an elite player by any stretch of the imagination. Clashed badly with Cora, the manager of the Red Sox, who gets along with everybody. And not a lot of people in New York seem to be sad when he left. Now, I'm bringing these two players up, Mookie Betts and Alex Verdugo, up because they are forever linked. The Dodgers had Verdugo as one of their top prospects. And then in February of 2020, just right around the time COVID was starting to take it, put its talons into our lives, the Red Sox and Dodgers pulled off a trade. Mookie Betts, David Price, and cash for Jeter Downs, Alex Verdugo, and Connor Wong. Now, a lot of people had fun with the fact that the Red Sox acquired Jeter, and Jeter Downs was supposed to be this, terrific infield prospect, and he played a grand total of 14 games with the Red Sox in 2022. Found himself on the Washington Nationals for a handful of games a few years ago. Hasn't played in the major leagues since. Connor Wong, who is also in the deal. Connor Wong is a good, decent catcher, the starting catcher for the Red Sox the last couple of years. Had a pretty good, had a good year last year. No one's mentioning him in the same breath as Pudge Rodriguez, but young catcher, did his job. And Verdugo, who was supposed to be the stud outfielder for the minor league, was going to fit right into the Red Sox outfield. And he was eventually flipped to the Yankees for 3 minor league pitchers, including Richard Fitz, who started a handful of games, actually pretty effectively for the Red Sox last year, and Greg Weiser, who they used out of the bullpen with varying degrees of success last year. So essentially, for Mookie Betts and for the Dodgers to take the contract to David Price and some cash, the Red Sox acquired a outfielder who couldn't get a job, who was flipped for a couple of young pitchers and a decent catcher. And in exchange, all it did was cost the Red Sox a generational talent, MVP, and World Series hero who's already helped lead the Dodgers to a pair of World Series titles. They're not coming anywhere near a World Series title in the COVID year without Mookie Betts, who led the league in WAR that year, 3.7 in the 55 games he played. He had 16 home runs in the truncated season. If you like WAR, it's not my favorite stat in the world, but he's twice led the National League in WAR, which means he must be doing something right. Twice was the runner-up in the National League MVP. And last year, while he did miss a significant amount of time, he missed about 50 games last year. Lest we forget, he got a couple of very big hits in the postseason, homered twice, and drove in 9 in the league championship series against the Mets, and hit the critical sacrifice fly in that gave the Dodgers the lead that they would not relinquish in the World Championship game, in the game where they clinched the World Series. But beyond that, he's a superstar. He's a Gold Glover. He's a Silver Slugger. He's still he's a couple of years older than Verdugo. It's not like he was on the wrong end of of 40 when they traded for him. And this year, once he gets into a game, it will be official. He will be a Dodger as long as he was a Red Sox. This trade has not worked out for the Red Sox. This trade was stupid then. Go back to the old episodes of Locked On MLB. I called it fractally stupid, that this trade was fractally stupid, meaning that the whole was stupid. But if you broke it down, it was actually made of other stupid parts. It was made of smaller stupid parts, and there's an infinite regression of the stupidity of the trade of Mookie Betts. And I think it goes beyond just the fact that one team got screwed in the trade and the other team absolutely cleaned up. It ranks as one of I think it is the worst trade of the 21st century in Major League Baseball. I actually don't think any other trade is close, but I think it ranks up there. I think there's only about 4 or 5 other trades in the history of baseball that have been as stupid as this trade, not as lopsided. There have been other lopsided trades, but trades that were done that were obviously dumb when they were made, and obviously bad because the motivation for the trade was not to improve the team, but an ulterior motive that, to me, in this deal for Mookie Betts, makes it, well, an all-time horrible trade. And I'm going to break that down a little bit in segment 2. Hey, let's hear about our friends over from FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on anything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and whatever else you're rooting for this March. Now, you got Arkansas already pulled off an upset over Kansas. Drake, the college, not the singer, had a 10-point upset over Missouri. Michigan and UC San Diego had a thriller. And if you had money on any of those games, you could have absolutely cleaned up. And did Alabama State upset Auburn? No, they got their clocks cleaned. But if you're going to be picking your favorites, you're going to pick your underdogs, FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and games props. The FanDuel app is so simple to use that when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoop action all tournament long. And while we're at it, let's talk to our friends over at Gametime. Now, do you know what? Nothing is better than catching a Major League Baseball game live. I've been to so many games. I went to games at Dodger Stadium. I went to games in, I almost said Candlestick Park, at Oakland, at Oracle Park, at Angel Stadium. I'm going to go to some other stadiums this year, too. I'm going to be heading off to Sacramento. I dare you to stop me. And you know what? When I get my tickets for those, I'm going to use Gametime. They got last-minute deals, all in pricing, and the lowest price guaranteed. Gametime takes the stress out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. Plus, ticket prices drop as Gametime gets closer, meaning you could score an incredible deal. Now, when I got tickets for the A's final game in the Oakland Coliseum, I used Gametime. I got a great view of my seats, and do you know what? I got to view where I was, and there were no hidden fees. And the Gametime pick feature, that makes finding the best deals effortless. It filters out the fluff and highlights the top discounts for the stadium. I went to the last game in Oakland. I'm going to a game in Sacramento this year, thanks to Gametime. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app. Create an account and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, the lowest prices. Do you know what they are? They are guaranteed. You know, when you look at bad trades in the history of baseball, it's sometimes easy to take a look at them in hindsight. There's sometimes some of the all-time terrible trades in the history of baseball have some sort of, well, justification for them. And like, for example, I often hear the uh, Tigers trading John Smoltz for Doyle Alexander, or the Expos trading Randy Johnson for Mark Langston being listed as all-time horrible trades. And they are trades that blew up in the face of those franchises. But they made sense when they happened. In fact, the Tigers won the division in many ways because Doyle Alexander went 9-0 down the stretch and they won all 11 of his starts. They don't touch the postseason if they don't acquire Doyle Alexander, who, by the way, was an all-star the very next year. That trade was praised when it was made. And if the Tigers went on to win the World Series that year, and they did get to the ALCS, then that trade would have been looked at as a great trade for Detroit. Now, it didn't work out, and Doyle Alexander lost the opener when Gary Gaetti smacked a couple homers off of him, and then John Smoltz turned into John Smoltz. But the times that a minor league player thrown into a deal turns into a Hall of Famer is so rare that we seem to remember them all. When the Mariners traded Mark Langston, he was one of the best pitchers in baseball, but they knew they weren't going to sign him to a long-term deal. The Mets were salivating to get him, and the Expos were trying to take advantage over a slightly weakened Mets team. And they acquired Langston because he was a legit ace, and they said, we're just going to go for it this year. And for a while, it worked. The Expos were in first place for a big chunk of 1989. They had a disastrous ending of the season, and the Cubs wound up being the one winning the division. But it was an instance of a team going for it. And nobody had Randy Johnson ticketed for being one of the great players of all time. Another trade that is often looked upon as one of the worst deals in the history of baseball was the trading of Frank Robinson. Now, that's another deal that did blow up in the face of the Cincinnati Reds. Frank Robinson was a former MVP for the Cincinnati Reds who was about to turn 30, and they traded him to the Baltimore Orioles. Now, Robinson was still tremendous in 1965, but the Reds, who had a ton of good hitters, including Pete Rose, Vada Pinson, and Tony Perez, needed pitching. And they felt, do you what? You're better trading a player a year too early than a year too late. And they wound up acquiring 3 players, including Milt Pappas, who was indeed a very good pitcher. Here's the problem. Frank Robinson won the Triple Crown his first year with Baltimore and led that franchise to their first ever World Series title. They were formerly the St. Louis Browns. So and he helped the Orioles win yet another title in 1970. So when you win the Triple Crown your first year out, yeah, it looks bad. But the trade made sense. It just didn't work out. I also have a hard time throwing trades where a team is dumping salary. Like the A's dumped salary with Mark McGwire, and it didn't work out for them. But they knew he wasn't going to re-sign a long-term deal with them. The Montreal Expos knew that Pedro Martinez was not going to sign a long-term deal with them, so they traded him to the Red Sox. They didn't have a lot of leverage, so yeah, those trades like that blew up in your face. But I have a hard time throwing those deals in with amongst the worst of the dumbest of all times, because they kind of made sense at the time. And the number of times that a minor leaguer blossoms into a superstar is so rare. Yeah, it happens every once in a while. And when it does, like the Red Sox trading Jeff Bagwell for Larry Anderson, yeah, that trade looks stupid in retrospect. At the time, The Red Sox needed pitching depth in their bullpen. They won the division on the final day of the season, and they already had Mo Vaughn and Scott Cooper in their in their depth chart in the minor league. So Bagwell looked like the odd man out. They said, "Hey, can we improve our bullpen?" Sure. It didn't work out. But when it comes down to stupid trades, those are the trades that are made when the organization has something in mind other than putting a good product on the field, and they also have the resources and the wherewithal to sign a player or to keep that player, and instead they trade them off. Now, the Red Sox in the late 1970s had several players who were, let's just call them free thinking, drug taking players on the team who the organization seemed to hate. Ferguson Jenkins, Bill Lee, Bernie Carbo, Jim Willoughby. And they were so hated by the organization that they basically dumped all four of them. Bill Lee was traded for a utility infielder named Stan Pappy. Ferguson Jenkins was traded for a pitcher named John Poloni, and they basically dumped Willoughby and Bernie Carbo. The first year that they dumped Fergie Jenkins, he was an all-star pitcher for the Rangers after they dumped him. And the Red Sox desperately needed another starting pitcher that year. The year after they dumped Bill Lee, he was the best left-hander in the American League. Stan Pappy was sitting on the bench, and a Red Sox team that was loaded with offense but weak on starting pitching. Guess what happened? They needed Bill Lee. Those are stupid trades because they were made not because they were improving the team, but they were spiting the players. But I think Mookie Betts' trade was worse. And as Jet Black Onyx said, they didn't want to pay Mookie. That's right. The Red Sox print money. The Red Sox have so much money. They have the Rich Nesson contract. The Fenway Park is filled. Money flows through Fenway Park. And they had a generational homegrown talent in Mookie Betts. And this wasn't not signing him to a deal like with Mo Vaughn or like with Carlton Fisk. This wasn't making a front office error like the deal with Freddie Lynn. This was a decision saying, we will not pay you because we billionaires with more money flowing through here, we're going to save $9.33 and avoid the luxury tax. Because, that's what fans love, the luxury tax. And so they made a trade to make the team worse so people with money flowing through the organization can save a couple of bucks. That's why that trade ranks amongst the worst ever. Now, of course, the worst move ever is the Red Sox selling Babe Ruth and many other stars like Ernie Shore and Carl Mays to the Yankees because Harrison Frazee, the owner of the Red Sox at the time, wanted to finance his Broadway plays. And of course, it changed the outlook of the Red Sox. It changed the outlook for the city of Boston. It changed the outlook for the New York Yankees and changed the American League to this day. The ripple effects of that move can still be felt. And it was a move not made to improve the team. And I think the other trades in baseball history that I would rank amongst the Mookie Betts trade, where it was stupid trades, people knew it was stupid while it was happening. And basically, it didn't matter because there was something else going on. And they both involved faces of the franchise. One involved the Mets. When Tom Seaver started clashing with ownership, and ownership started playing games by trying to trash Tom Seaver. Tom Seaver, the greatest New York pitcher since Christy Mathewson. Tom Seaver, who pitched the Mets to a World Series title in 1969 and almost did it again in 1973, wanted to be paid. And with free agency now a new thing and looming, the owner of the Mets started clashing with him and saying nasty things to the press and everything like that. And in the middle of the 1977 season, they traded Tom Seaver off. Now, they did get a couple of decent players from it, especially Pat Zachary, late Pat Zachary, who was the reigning National League Rookie of the Year, and Doug Flynn and Steve Henderson. It wasn't like they got no players back for him, but it was clear when it happened, it was a trade that Met fans choked on their vomit as it happened. It was also clear that it was not a move that was being made to improve the team. It was being made to spite a superstar. And Tom Seaver, who should have been a Met for life, so should have Nolan Ryan for that matter. But they didn't know Nolan Ryan was going to become Nolan Ryan. But they knew Tom Seaver was Tom Seaver, just like they knew Mookie Betts was Mookie Betts. And they traded him out of spite. And it torpedoed the Mets for about 5 or 6 years and absolutely devastated the fan base that Tom Seaver was pitching for the Reds. He threw his first no-hitter as a Red. Eventually, he would return to the Mets, and that was only for one season. And the less said about that, the better. But the trade of Tom Seaver is right up there. The other trade that I would put along there was the Dodgers, who had the man who was going to become, if he had stayed with the Los Angeles Dodgers his whole career, would have been the greatest offensive player in the history of the Los Angeles Dodgers. And he had a great origin story, too. He had a great mythology about him, too. Mike Piazza was drafted as a favor to Tom Lasorda because Tom Lasorda was friends with Mike Piazza's family, and he was his godfather and all this other stuff. And they drafted him and had him become a catcher, and he came up and became a superstar. There's no getting around it. And a charismatic superstar and a hard not to root for superstar. Handsome dude with a sense of flair for the dramatic, won the Rookie of the Year in 1993 and was all-star catcher year in and year out, and one of the faces of all of baseball. And after the 1997 season, when he was again one of the best players in the game, and certainly one of the best offensive catchers we had ever seen, he wanted to be paid. And the Dodgers, a wealthy organization with new ownership, clashed with him and wound up trading him to the Florida Marlins. Now, they wound up getting a couple of decent players, and not the least of which was Gary Sheffield, who I think is a borderline Hall of Famer and maybe should be in the Hall of Fame. But Mike Piazza should have been a Dodger for life. He was the face of the franchise. And he wound up becoming, if you close your eyes, you think of Mike Piazza, what team do you imagine him with? Probably think of him as a Met. He played more years with the Mets. And guess what? He finished with 427 home runs. Do you know what the Dodger record is for home runs? 389. 389. He drove in 1,335 runs, more than the Dodgers' all-time record. If he had stayed his whole career with the Dodgers and wound up replicating the numbers he had in his career, it's not like Shea Stadium was a homer-friendly ballpark, he would have been the all-time home run and run batted in leader in the history of the Dodger organization, going back to Brooklyn. And he was a 308 career average and had a career OPS of 922 as a catcher. And the Dodgers played games with him. And with that, I think those are the 4 worst trades, stupidest trades in baseball history. Selling of Babe Ruth, trading of Tom Seaver, trading of Mike Piazza, and of Mookie Betts. Not just because of the trades being lopsided, but because the motivation behind the trades from wealthy organizations who could afford it made the team worse and gave the opportunity for a player to be the face of a different franchise. And so, yeah, no excuses.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the bracket breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
All right, we're going a little bit long today, so I'm going to wrap it up. Jet Black Onyx says the Willie Mays trade was so sad, Giants to the Mets. Yeah, but he was also the end of his career and finishing up with New York. I don't think that's the same thing as what we're talking about here. This was not. Imagine if they had traded Willie Mays in 1961 because he wanted a raise. That's why these are the trades that I think are the stupidest of all time. Well, do you know what? Well, we're running long, so I'm just going to go right to the trivia question. Trivia question involves a Hall of Famer and trades. Greg Maddux was traded twice in his career. One time he was traded, the two players that they got back from him never saw a game in the major leagues. Who is the only major league player who was ever traded for Greg Maddux? And do you know what? It was 1-for-1. Greg Maddux in exchange for this major league player. Put your answer down here and follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter or whatever they're calling it these days. And on Instagram, I am your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. But if you have something you want to say, leave it down here. I'm probably going to take the weekend off and come back on Monday. And pretty soon I'm going to be launching the new In Memoriam video. Should be out by Wednesday. And then the season starts for real for everybody else, not just Dodgers and Cubs, on this Thursday. So talking about the idiocy of the Mookie Betts trade and offending people by keep talking about the Dodgers. This has been Locked On MLB. I'm your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.